Hello, Sex Therapy 101 friends. You notice I might have taken a break, but we're back and we're excited. And I'm really passionate about this new series that I'm going to be offering to all of you. I haven't disappeared. I've been working on some projects that are really meaningful to me. And one of those is a book for the public about my research about regarding long-term outcomes of consenting to unwanted sex or duty sex, as we sometimes call it. And in doing that, adding to my own research over the year, you'll see my hair change, my face change, because these were all recorded over the course of a year. And I wanted to talk to experts about the cultural implications or cultural beliefs or the cultural ideas among different communities in the US that might protect people against negative outcomes and that might actually kind of promote people into some of the more negative outcomes. And that is the series I have to offer you. I'm really excited. It's been really meaningful to me. It's been enlightening to me. It's really helped me make sure that this book is what I want it to be for all of you. So with no ado, here we go. This is going to be the intro for the whole series. And I'll give you a little bit of a bio for each, and then we'll jump into the recording of the interview. Sheva Marcus is a sex therapist in private practice. She was the founder and served as the clinical director of one of the largest sexual health centers in the US for 25 years. She's amazing. She's been on my radar for several years. She's the author of Satisfaction Guaranteed, How to Have the Sex You've Always Wanted. And I think you're really going to enjoy her perspective. I know that I did.
Hi, Cami.
Well, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I really appreciate being able to meet with you this morning.
I'm happy to do this. I feel like I may throw a monkey wrench into some of your narratives, but
I'm happy. No, that's what this is about.
why don't you give me your little elevator pitch? I think it'll be
Yeah.
easier for me to, yeah.
Okay. So what we did is we did a survey with 1,300 respondents. Was amazing. And we were looking at, are there any long-term outcomes for women who do consent to sex that they don't necessarily want?
They participated, and so they were doing everything retroactively, right? Like what they remembered participating in, which they
Correct.
don't want to, but now they feel.
Correct. And so then we had one qualitative portion and one quantitative portion. And we quoted the comments and we scored the assessments and we're
Yeah,
like,
and I think
okay,
it's
what is
amazing
this?
research. I think it's amazing research. I do think it's amazing research.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm so glad you'll help me figure out what some of it means from your
Okay.
perspective. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Everybody has their own groups they work with, and that's definitely true.
So first question was just using your own clinical lens and your expertise of relationships and sexuality. How do you interpret these findings? What would you explain as happening from your background?
So I think there's two responses, and I did the one thing I did not look over is your questions. So they may be I may be a little tad kind of out of the way you want things, but
That's fine.
so I think there's two different issues. That's why I initially jumped in and said, "Did you have a control group?"
Right.
Right? Because I think that in general, our expectations about um, women's interest in sex, it may be not correlated with reality. And
Mm-hmm.
that in general,
Mm-hmm.
women in long-term relationships or even not in long-term relationships some of these words are very strong, anxiety, avoidance, aversion. I would soften those, but less interested, um, having a harder time accessing, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, putting less value on sex, that may happen as hormones
Right.
drop.
Sure.
And so that has a lot to do with our narrative about how we then define them and how
Nice.
women then create those narratives in their head.
Okay, so you're saying one piece that isn't being examined here is that lifespan piece and the biological components that create this for most women as we age. And the group kind of snagged was that age group, and we can't look away from that possibility too.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the secondary layer on that
Mm-hmm.
is how we create narratives around that,
Mm-hmm.
right? If my interest in sex is less than it was when I was 22, right? Is that because I'm avoidant? You
Mm-hmm.
know, am I anxious because I feel like it should be like when I was 22? Am I
Mm-hmm.
anxious because it's harder to get turned on than it was when I was 22? Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily a reaction to the relationship or the
Yeah.
situation we're in, which I think everybody jumps to. Do you know what I mean? Like
Okay. Yeah.
that is where I get like when couples come in and they say, our sex life sucks. And like, what is going on with our relationship that our sex life sucks?
Yeah.
I'm like, that is a big leap. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Right.
that leap gets worsened when they walk into a couples therapist who says somewhere on their website, oh, I do sex, right? And they come
Yeah.
like, I think we're kind of getting along sort of okay, but like we haven't had sex in a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I bet you I'm thinking, well, yeah, most relationships would not do well if you haven't had sex in a year. And the couples
Mm-hmm.
therapist is saying, well, I'll tell you what, let's get all the communication in order, let's get the relationship going well, and then your
Right.
sex life is gonna follow. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's
That doesn't
bullshit.
happen. Yeah.
Okay, so are you
Yeah.
okay with foul language? Because I'm like,
Oh, yeah, you're great.
okay,
You're
good.
great.
Not only does it not happen, but you can get the relationship to a pretty damn good place.
Mm-hmm.
And that therapist is never even going to address their sex life because the
Right.
therapist is uncomfortable with it, whether they realize it or not, or because they're not good at it, or they don't know what they're doing. And sometimes if you get the sex life in order, the rest of the relationship falls in place. Like there's
Right.
so much more multifactorial than I think people give it credit for. So
Absolutely.
that's narrative one.
Yeah.
Narrative two has to do with our expectation that our interest in sex will be visceral rather than cognitive, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
People have people have called this, spontaneous versus, whatever. Like that is the buzzword of,
It is.
I don't
Yeah.
have spontaneous responsive, but people don't understand what that means. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm.
Like people do not understand what that means. So I think again, when a woman says it was coercive sex, it's only coercive if you're in starting gambit is I should have wanted this to start with, right? Right.
Right.
And,
Right.
and women go into the spiral, and I think our whole society has gone into the spiral now where it's like coercive, and then it feels like pressure, and then how am I going to get myself in the mood next time? And I don't really want to do it. If I'm doing it, what I don't really like, my choice might not be to have sex right now, but I need to have sex because he wants to have sex. Well, that feels pretty coercive. But if you like reframe it and you say, well, he would like to have sex now, you're in a relationship. Can you get yourself in the mood where you are willing to have sex now? Well, then does that feel coercive, or that means like a decision that I made that I'm going to want to have sex?
Right.
And
Right.
the and now I'm just going, can I keep talking or
Absolutely. This is
okay,
great.
okay,
This
I'm
is
just
great.
gonna
Yeah,
keep talking.
absolutely.
Okay,
The
okay.
black and white of consent and the black and white of coercion is absolutely a problem. We've got to put this on a spectrum.
So
Yeah.
I think a lot about it because I always say to people, stop. This is my first piece of advice. Stop thinking about wanting sex as like magic pixie dust is coming on, and
Mm-hmm.
think of your sex life as like an exercise or a movement program, right? I know
Mm-hmm.
it sounds so unsexy for a sex therapist to say that, but the reality is that most of us feel like exercise makes us feel good. It makes us feel like the rest of our life works better. It makes us feel healthier. We're often glad we did it. If we found a way to do it that we like, we feel great even while we're doing it. But that does not mean we want to get off the couch and move
Right.
every time,
Right.
no matter how much you love, right? So I guess it pushes my buttons a little bit when people say coercive sex because I feel like, and sometimes it is. I believe me, I get that there's a whole other piece of this, but that's not
Yeah.
what I'm talking about. I'm talking about
Right.
long-term.
Talking about
Be
like a collaboration, negotiation, this how do
it's
two
like
people work through
let's say
together
you
this
joined a basketball, you love to play
yeah.
basketball, you feel great when you're playing basketball, and you joined a basketball team.
Mm-hmm.
And then like you don't feel like going to practice.
Right.
Like, or I don't feel like going to that game that day. Like, we wouldn't say like that was okay. It's your choice to say, I don't want to play basketball anymore and I don't want to be on the team. That is 100% your choice. If you say, like, really, I don't enjoy sex, I don't like it, and I don't want to be in a relationship where it's expected of me, I'm like, you go, girl. You do not need to do that. But
Mm-hmm.
as long as you are committed to a relationship where you have that, it seems like an expectation part, then the question is, yeah, you don't want to get off the sofa. Like, How do you make it more fun? How do you say to yourself, okay, well, I'm going to be happy because I love it when I'm at the games. I really love playing the games. I just don't feel like going to the practices. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
and it's legitimate for your teammates to expect you to show up. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
so, and that might say, you know what, like I always feel more like going to the practices if I do a run beforehand, or I feel more like going to the practices if somebody gives me a foot massage beforehand. You know
Mhm.
what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
but I feel like that's where the narrative gets completely screwed up. It's like there's something about sex where we feel like it should be this magical space in our life
Mhm.
where we always kind of want to do it, or we should only do it when we feel like it. I'm say like
Yeah.
it's like it's this bizarre. I feel like there's a few areas where we have, as a society, just completely like missed the point. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you shouldn't have sex if you don't want to have sex. I'm the first one to say that. If you're like, my knee hurts today and I am not
Mhm.
going to practice, do you know what
Mhm.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's great. Or you know what? I'm really wiped out, guys, and I need 2 weeks off because I'm wiped. Like that's fine, but not like, well, if I don't feel like getting to practice, do you know what I'm saying? Like it.
Right. Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
now I guess
So
when
that, and we
are
saw
you
that in our
horrified by my
research.
saying that? Like I feel
No,
like
no, no, I'm not horrified because we saw that in our research where there was like 40% of women and they were like, well, I didn't want to at first, but once we got going, I had a good time. And even if it was bad sex, it was fine. It didn't bother me. And then there was this other portion with that scored on like severe trauma on the PCLS, of saying, well, I cried during and after. And I was like, like, and it's different. Like, we're seeing some different patterns within the research. And you're saying, okay, we got to really not treat this as one group
and
here.
even the ones that are crying. So here's the interesting
Hmm.
one. Even the
Yeah.
ones that are crying, what I'd want to sort of start parsing out with them was
Yeah.
what made them cry. Because I have some
Hmm.
people who like, I hate my partner. I don't want to be doing this. He's
Yeah.
so insensitive to me. And
Right.
okay. Then there's
Yeah.
one group where he's trying and I get no pleasure. And it makes me feel like I am a failure every time I have sex. That is a huge, huge piece here. And then the question
Mhm.
becomes, how do we work with you so that you feel good about your sex life, not
Yeah.
happy about it? That's okay. Then there's the ones who are like, I'm crying because like, it's not supposed to be this way. I'm supposed to want to have,
Mhm.
like, it's because their narrative is all broken also.
Yeah.
So
That.
I think that 40%
Hmm.
could probably be, I could guess, but at least cut in half if they had
Yeah.
some actual practical, good, useful, supportive advice. Do you know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
like
That's
these long-term expectations about how sex usually looks with that some of the
everybody
pain
else.
is the narrative and
Yeah,
their beliefs.
and pain. And when you use the word pain, can I just tell you the number of women I see who are like, when I'll say, well, they come in because they have low desire, and I'll be like, and what about the pain? Is there any pain? And they're like, well, a little bit, but it's tolerable. And I'm like, fuck. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, but it's like expectation. So what would be fascinating to me is for you to take that 40% if you're ever up for it, and then
Mhm.
start striding that one even down further, because it would
Yeah.
be so interesting about how many of those things also have to do with our screwed up narrative, our non-understanding of things, our unrealistic expectations, and how much
Mhm.
of them really are really coercive, because that really is, it's a terrible, like when I have a client who's like, husband expects to have sex every day and like is completely not sensitive to her needs, like that's horrible. And yes, that's traumatic. And yes, I can't imagine that not having significantly long impact.
Mhm. Yeah. No,
Okay, so
I
I just dumped,
appreciate
I
this.
just dumped a lot at you.
No, I'm glad. I want to hear it. These are
and, and even those women who are like in the other 60%, would however it broke down, were like, it was fine when I got started. The narrative that your husband or your partner in the bed should be what turns you on, as opposed to you having responsibility yourself for getting yourself turned on before you even
yes.
come into that. Unhelpful. So unhelpful.
Hmm.
All right.
No, I
Okay.
appreciate this part where there's this the narratives, the beliefs, our expectations, our lack of education, a lot of that is at play here. And also, you recognizing some of the words we use get in our way too, that the language needs to adapt here or change because we can be having a conversation and think we're talking about one thing and have, what is coercion? What is consent? Yeah.
What is trauma?
What is yes, yes, that's even up for debate. Yes, absolutely. Um, I appreciate this. I love your thoughts. what about aspects of community culture? Since the group was homogeneous and you are an expert in, with your community in the Jewish community, what do you have thoughts there for us? Uh-huh.
So, yeah, no, that's really, really interesting. So I do see a variety of clients, but it definitely leans towards being monogamous.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, right. It gears towards being heteronormative and not monogamous. And I have people out of that group, but
Hmm.
long-term early marriages,
Hmm.
heterosexual goes kind of without saying. I mean, I have some gay couples, but mostly not. And I usually refer them out because I feel like there's people who are better with that population. Um, and the coercion piece is quite interesting because there are, especially as you move into the more religious factors of the Jewish community, there are a lot of expectations. Some of them good, some of them less good.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think in the Jewish community, in the let's call it the observant or Orthodox Jewish community, and you do get it's a huge span, right?
It
Like
is a huge umbrella.
there's
Yeah.
me like in the modern Orthodox community, and then
Mhm.
there's like more observant, more religious, and then there's the Hasidic community, and they're
Yeah.
all slightly different. But
Yeah.
in a theoretical world, sexual pleasure is considered a positive thing, as opposed to in the Catholic world, where I think it's a little bit more questionable. Now, I sometimes get irritated when people say this because it's kind of
Okay.
simplistic, because even though theoretically, when you look at sources, and there's hundreds of thousands of Jewish sources on this, most of them, not all of them, most of them are sort of pro-sexual pleasure.
Yeah.
That's de jure, but de facto, the girls go
Sure.
the girls and the boys go to yeshivas where like they're told that their bodies are, that there's a split between the holy spiritual realm and the
Physical.
the physical, yeah, like less good, dangerous realm,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
so where does sex end up with that? And then what that ends up doing for some of these women, and I'll give you a great story, which I think just was I have so many of these, but this one was just encapsulated it. They get caught in this space between like, well, I'm supposed to be having physical pleasure, but really I'm supposed to be like in this better realm of like
Hmm.
holiness. And like, how do you navigate those two things? And so this, I think, will illustrate this really well. I had this amazing, I loved her to pieces. She came in, she was like having pain. They hadn't had sex in like 6 months to a year. She was in the 30s and had like 3 kids, two, three kids. And, so we kind of worked through the pain. I got them back to having non-intercourse sex, which is a complication in this community because you're not really allowed to ejaculate outside the vagina,
Right.
although that could be worked around. Often the
Yeah.
rabbis could be helpful with that again. And they were going, but they were having good sex. We got the intercourse back in, no pain. And she got the idea that she kind of had to get herself turned on before they went in. We were scheduling it so that it was like less pressured for her. She would get
Hmm.
herself turned on before she went in, and it was really working really well, but something was missing, and I was having a really hard time with her. Like I was feeling like she was like, I still feel like it's very stressful. She was using this word stressful.
Hmm.
And like she kept being afraid she would not be able to sustain it. Like I could feel like there was
Oh.
something like going on here. And, at some point she was masturbating once a week or twice a week. And so I was like, well, let's dig a little deeper into what the difference is between your masturbation and your having sex with your husband. Like, how does that? And she said, well, I sort of feel like I need to be focused like on him entirely when we're having sex. I need to like I need, she didn't use these words, but she was like, there needs to be this like deep religious, emotional,
Yeah.
spiritual connection. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I felt like I had to do that every time I had sex. I would never have sex. I'm like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like,
Like when she's alone, she has the freedom of her own thought world, but when she's with a partner,
she
all the
has to somehow,
attention.
yeah, these things enter, and it has to be this meaningful spiritual experience. That's, you know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Right.
Well, that is a lot of weight to put on every time you have sex. Do you know what I mean? With her, I said, are you Jewish? You're not.
No, but I have a minor in world religions, so it's kind of a
Okay,
thing of mine.
so we do the, our Shabbat, our Sabbaths are not like, I don't use electricity, I don't whatever. So we
Yeah.
have Shabbat dinner. That's usually a big thing. It's like lovely, I put out my china, whatever. We have company, whatever. And I looked at her and I'm like, if every time you have sex, it had to be a Shabbat dinner, like with your china and the cooking,
How
yeah,
much work?
sometimes you just want a sandwich. Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes it's okay to have an ice cream sundae or just have a sandwich. Like it's okay to just be getting the pleasure that you're getting at it. And the weight that dropped off this woman, do you know what I'm saying? Like, now I don't know if we could have had that conversation 3 months earlier because there were all these other stuff, but like some of the feeling of coercion is because our expectations that these
Yeah.
women put on themselves are outrageous. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
again, it goes back to like it feels like, well, I don't want to have sex. I wouldn't want to have sex either. If every time I had sex, I had such enormous expectations being put on me.
Right.
Right. It
Yeah.
has to be this
Yeah.
meeting of the soul. Like, I'm just like, are
Yeah.
you like that? I mean, and I'm laughing. I said to her, if you have regular sex once in a while, it will feel like that. And that's amazing. And if you don't have sex, you're never going to feel like that. But like, so, so this feeling of I have to have sex once a week or twice a week feels like it's not overwhelming if you don't put overwhelming expectations on it, right? So that's what I see in this community.
Yeah.
I see I see in a really good way that I feel like, and again, I have a skewed perspective, right? I never did a research study. I only have the women I'm working with, but it feels to me like when the sex life is not working well, they're quicker to come in for help somehow. Like it feels like they think like it's a value in the house,
Okay.
which is
Okay.
interesting, right? And I've had in the Hasidic community, I've had guys dragging their wives in. They're like, I'm getting pleasure out of this, and she's not getting any pleasure, and I don't
That's
like
more
that.
my experience. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, from the Hasidic guys.
No, just over here in the West, but see more of the men bringing in the women. And you're
Yes,
saying that in your community, the women are saying, I need to change this. They're the one driving the
right. But
change.
I also, in the more religious, the really, when you
The
get
more
really
fundamental or the more orthodox we
correct,
get.
yes, yes. So then you are seeing the men dragging the women in because the women sort of don't even get, I think, that there's what's supposed to be happening there, right? Like you're not
Yeah.
exposed to movies, you're not exposed to books, they don't get and whatever. So so I think that's I think a big piece of it. You know, it's a really interesting question. When you move into the more ultra orthodox communities, the early sex is often a nightmare.
Mm.
And that does feel very coercive. But to be fair, it's coercive to both the men and the women. Like
It's
that
the
first
system.
night, like in some of these cases, they've met each other once or
Yeah.
twice. Then they meet under the wedding canopy, the chuppah, and then they're expected that night to go to have intercourse. And like everybody's often focusing on that poor woman, which it does. Sometimes it feels like rape. But for the guys, it also feels like they don't want to be doing this. They don't know what they're doing. They're nervous as anything. They're hurting this person. They're scared to death. And I do think that can have long-term ramifications. I don't have numbers on any of this stuff.
Mm.
Is that answering your question at all, or did I go too
Yeah.
far afield?
No, it's great. Yeah.
Right.
The next couple questions were just what parts of the community culture do you think are protective of this and which are maybe lean into promoting it,
A protective of the
of
conversion.
yeah, of women consenting to unwanted sex,
Yeah, so they are taught, especially as you move into the more religious communities. As you move into the more right-wing fundamentalist communities, the women are definitely taught this, like you have to have sex whenever your husband wants to have sex message, which is not helpful and not good. Okay, so
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's also you get into some of the ultra orthodox communities where there's actual expectations about how often you're supposed to have sex, and it could be a lot.
Mm.
Right? There's a passage in the Talmud. It's this, it makes me laugh a little bit because people, most things in the Talmud people do not take literally, like the legal tractates all sort of develop them. This
Yeah.
one is like, how often are you supposed to have sex? So if you're a student, if you study full time, it's every day. If you're like a businessman kind of thing, it's like twice a week.
Mhm.
If you're like a sailor on a voyage, it could be like once a month, right? Now, to a certain degree, these things were developed as like, I think seen as protection for the woman. Like if you are a sailor and you're traveling, you need to come home at least once a month,
Okay. Yeah.
right? Like your wife is entitled to conjugal visits, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the flip side for all these guys who are sitting in their yeshiva studying is like, we're supposed to have sex every day. And some of these girls are learning, like, if your husband wants it, you got to say yes, right? Another place where you see this, which is insane to me, is, are you at all familiar with the ritual bath or the mikvah?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. Yes.
Right. So that's a very fundamental central principle to pretty much all of Orthodox life, right? Like even when you enter the modern Orthodox community, we keep that. There is an idea, not a Jewish law, but an idea that after you've been separated for 2 weeks and you go to the mikvah, you should have sex that night.
Right. Yeah.
That causes so many problems. I cannot even begin to tell you because there's this sort of joking saying that women say have a fight on mikvah night. Like
Yeah.
you try to have a fight because you don't want to have sex that night, right?
Mm.
It puts this, it's so funny because I feel like when I'm a big proponent of scheduling sex, right? That I think is like pretty useful for most couples. There's something about the fact that like you haven't really touched each other, in some cases not touched each other at all for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then you're expected to like go home and have sex and have intercourse specifically. And there's something about the feeling, I think, of being not having a choice with that it goes so deep for so many women that there's just this level of resentment. And the funniest thing is there's really, I'm telling you, there's zero Jewish law about this. For 6 years, I did a podcast with a rabbi. It was called The Joy of
Mhm.
Text. It was where
Yeah.
real text meets Jewish law. And we dug into so many things like, masturbation and kink. And we did, at least one, maybe more episode on having sex and like, there's no law saying you need to do that. Like nobody says you have to do that. And yet it has become so endemic in our lore that people do it. And as soon as I say to women, listen, you don't have to have sex the night you come back from mikvah. You can fool around, you can kiss, you can make out, whatever you can if you want, but you do not have to. If I tell you the difference and when you're looking at coercion for women, as soon
Yeah.
as you take away the element of you have to,
Yeah.
it changes the world. It's like, I can't tell you, I would say probably 80% of them will have sex then. And
Mm-hmm.
20% may choose not to. They're too tired. They don't want to. They'll do it the next night, whatever.
The power of having a choice matters a little bit more than if you would opt out. I
Yes.
mean, that
Yes,
wasn't very
exactly.
eloquent. That's why I hear you saying it. Yeah.
No, it's absolutely
Power of
extremely
having a
eloquent. Yes, the
choice.
power of having a choice for most women is really, which is why when we talk about scheduling sex, I will often say to women, like, it has to be them. It has to be coming from them. Like they need to like, what works for you? What would you like? How would you do that? And what happens if you can't do that? Like women have to feel like they have a choice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, those are places where I really see it does affect the community.
Mhm.
Let me just think. Let me also think about, because I tend to see more women than men, and I just want to make sure I'm not leaving out the guys on this one. No, I mean, I think just the issue of not getting good sex education, which I think is, I think the Orthodox community gets blamed a lot, but I don't see such great sex education anywhere, to be fair. So it's like,
Yeah, we can lay a lot at the feet of purity culture, but then I'm like, okay, but isn't that Cosmo article the same thing?
no, 100%, absolutely. So I just think our culture is sort of Victorian. I don't know what other cultures, but I do think I'll throw one other thing in, which again, I don't know in terms of communicate, like the pressure to have sex from intercourse, orgasms from intercourse,
Mhm.
I think adds to the feeling of pressure to the women in a way that's not helpful. And I think, again, I do not think this is unique to the Jewish community or the Orthodox Jewish
Yeah.
community. Like I think our whole society is below this, but it is worse in the religious communities because when the sources use the word sex, they mean intercourse. And there's thousands and thousands of sources on this, Talmudic sources, Mishnaic sources, biblical sources. And so that's a whole project. Like saying to
To
people,
redefine sex away
uh-huh,
from intercourse.
uh-huh, uh-huh. And that does make it, sometimes women feel like, both of them, I think both the men and the women feel like there's, again, as soon as you take choice away, it feels coercive, right? Right.
Mhm.
And this whole religious idea of not ejaculating outside the vagina is a big one, because that means that you have to have intercourse every time you have sex. So, again, those of us who are in the community and have rabbis, we can work around that to a certain degree, because the truth is the rabbis are the smart rabbis who actually know their stuff and have all the range of sources will be very quick to say, if the woman's having pain, you absolutely 100% can have other
Mm.
kinds of sex. But
Okay.
the lower level rabbis, the ones who aren't as knowledgeable and who just, it's easier to be strict about something than to start looking for all
Mhm.
the internal loopholes, make it very hard, which is why a lot of these women end up having intercourse even though they're having pain. And that is very bad and coercive and damaging. And in this case, I would use the word traumatic.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you're helping us stratify out how the reasons for not wanting it impact the outcome too. And if it's enduring physical pain, that's expected of us. That's going to score a lot higher on your uh, trauma scale.
For
There.
sure, for sure, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Tell me if you're comfortable a little bit more about that, because I have worked with Orthodox Jewish company or couples, and that is the difficulty about what do we do with intercourse and ejaculation and masturbation.
So if there is pain, then in almost every case, they can go to a rabbinic authority. I want to, again, it's very important to understand that the rabbinic authority, as opposed in the Catholic religion, is not about saying something's okay or not okay, like sort of from God, but more like finding sources to support their position, right?
Mhm.
So understanding. So if you know 1,000 sources on this, you're going to be a lot more knowledgeable than somebody who knows 4 sources on this, right? So okay. So, which is why I loved working with this rabbi, because he was so incredibly knowledgeable. He would start yanking sources from all over the place when I did this podcast.
Yeah.
So much fun. But so there are myriads of sources that will allow you to ejaculate, to not have intercourse when you're having sex if there's pain. Now, there are tons of sources as well, not tons, there's a few sources as well that say, as long as you're in the context of your normal monogamous long-term relationship, you can do whatever you want. You can have anal sex, you can have oral sex, you don't have to ejaculate in the vagina. It should just not become your primary way of having sex. That's honestly, that's pretty the mainstream position, honestly, in the more slightly modern communities. But even you go into the more ultra Orthodox communities, if there is pain, there's always going to be a knowledgeable person who will say to you, hold off, ejaculate. Some of them may say, I want you to ejaculate on the vulva. So it's kind of in the area as opposed to, between her boobs or, on her ass,
Okay.
whatever.
Okay.
But,
Yeah.
but there's 99% of the time, there is somebody who can help the woman and the husband navigate that.
And there's not an expectation of celibacy or like
Not at all.
abstaining from an ejaculation
Not
from
at
the
all.
man.
Now that's the reality of the rabbinic situation, but that doesn't mean that this doesn't, like, I was seeing a couple where he wouldn't hear of it. He wouldn't even go talk to anybody. Like because there are some sources that say, masturbating is equivalent of murder, right? You're killing all those sperm, right? Well, once you get that into a 15-year-old boy's head, it is very hard to change that narrative, right? No matter what I say to him or what other rabbis say to him, saying like, it is. I had one guy who felt he was sure that his son was having some terrible urinary problems, and he thought it was because he had masturbated, right? And so now, if he had been willing to work on it with me, we probably could have dug deep, but he wasn't. Like, it was like he was being punished, right? God was punishing. So it's once you're working in that situation, it becomes very hard to work around that, right? Then the best you're doing is trying to work with the woman to figure out how you can mitigate the pain, or tell her to stop having sex altogether, which is, and sometimes they do. Like, I've had religious couples who the guys have just not had any kind of, they haven't masturbated and they haven't had sex in a year or two. And that's terrible also, because then, I'm always concerned they won't be able to ejaculate when the time comes. Do you know what I mean? Like, it creates
Yeah.
secondary problems, right?
What I'm hearing is like this context could some may define as, oh, the woman has low desire, or some may say, oh, this couple has a desire discrepancy, but I'm hearing you define it more as advocating for choice and collaboration, or put it into your own words that instead of framing it as like a diagnosis of low desire or diagnosis of, or not diagnosis, but oh, they
Yeah,
have
yeah,
a
yeah.
desire discrepancy,
Mhm.
how would you describe
I
this
would say,
pattern?
no, I would say they have a desire discrepancy or she's suffering with low desire,
Mhm.
but let's understand what that means
Mhm.
because does that mean that she has unrealistic, do you know what I'm saying? Like, I agree with the diagnosis, right? The
Okay, yeah.
question is just, what I don't agree with is the responses. So
Mhm.
what I think is like, is that coming because her ideas? So is that coming, if you have low desire, is it because the sex itself is bad? So then we
Yeah.
got to figure that's a separate bucket. We got to move that out, right?
Mhm.
Is it because, and this is, I think, is a big piece of it, our narratives and our expectations of what desire should look like within the terms of the long conversation is distorted, and
Mhm.
you're working with a very broken model, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So I kind of feel like it's those, I would bring it into those two, or do you have low desire because your physiology is such, and I will throw this in because I
Yeah.
shouldn't let this go, right? Men's and women's testosterone, I don't know how much you know about this, goes down as they get older. Okay.
Right.
It is
Yeah.
like it is like, it is totally ignored by the therapeutic community in a way that enrages me.
Mhm.
I just had a couple where their sex life, they used to have a great sex life, second marriage, they've been married 20 years. They had a great sex life. And about 3 or 4 years ago, it kind of started petering down. And now it was like close to nothing when I saw them. Super, super, if like high level architects flying all over the world, like really smart, right? Like really smart, interesting, intellectual, and like I'm like talking to them, and he was the initiator, and it was really important that he be the initiator. So her vagina is a mess, and we're cleaning up her vagina, right? She's gotten
Yeah.
terrible doctors, whatever. But you and I know you can have a great sex life even without intercourse. And it's not like they're religious, so that wasn't, a problem.
Mhm.
His desire has just slowly, slowly, slowly gone down, and I'm like, you need to get your testosterone checked. Like this is ridiculous. So I have a urologist I love in New York that I work with. So he walks in there, and she says to me, you know what's going on? His testosterone was, it wasn't even low. It was probably on the higher end of normal, that we call
Mhm.
normal, but there's no question. Hearing his story, his testosterone was lower than it used to be. I don't know what his testosterone used to be.
Right.
So this, I don't know how much you know testosterone. Testosterone for men are looked at 300 to 900 or something. So he was
Mhm.
like at 600, which nobody would look at and say low, right? But believe me, at
Right.
300, he'd be like lying on the floor. So anyway, so he says to the doctor, he said, like I've been married for 20 years and like, it's just one of those things kind of thing. And like, she's my friend. So I call her up and like, just fucking put him on testosterone, get him to 1200, which is like a very reasonable level to be at, but it's on the high end. You have to keep an eye.
Uh-huh.
You want to make sure on things, whatever. I, if I don't do this usually, I say to the people I supervise, you can't want this more than they want it. But like in this case, I just really loved him and whatever. And I'm like dragging him and getting the testosterone shot. 2 weeks after those testosterone shots, he's like, oh my God. I'm like, like I see, I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about it again. And then a week or two later, he says, you know what, Sheva? It's kind of like when you sort of start floating out to sea and you're comfortable and it's very gradual and you look up all of a sudden and you don't even the horizon's out there, but you don't remember what it was that you didn't notice. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Mhm.
And it's like, I could have talked to them till I was blue in the face. They were having some issues. I helped them with some of those issues, but his libido was his libido, right? And so, and for women, estrogen and testosterone also, and they do not have the same magic. I will just say, with men, it's almost like a light switch. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
you get them on a decent amount of testosterone and they want to have sex. And my hunch is if we did that enough with women, we would feel that also. But that's, there's some hair loss, there's some acne, there's some reasons women don't want to be on testosterone. I totally, totally get that. So you got to go other venues. But acknowledge the fact that your libido is going to be lower and that may be part of it. And do you want your sex life to die? Right? Then it goes back to the basketball team, right? Like
Yeah.
maybe
Mhm.
you decide no more basketball for me, but is that really what you want in your life? Will that make you happy? Or do you feel like I'm going to start playing volleyball? Do you know what I'm saying?
Mhm. Yeah.
So I think the physiological pieces, and so I will recommend to women that they either go on DHEA or they go testosterone or just get more sunlight. Like there's other ways to fight this, but there is a physiological reality. Or
Yeah.
just say to yourself, like, I'm not going to spontaneously want sex the way maybe I did when I was 18, but I still can have good orgasms. I still feel good when I'm doing it. So I feel like I have no idea what your question was and whether I'm answering it. I'm laughing. Did I just go totally haywire?
No, you're great because I gave you only two options and you were great and said, I don't really like those two options. I said,
Okay.
low desire, desire discrepancy. And you said,
Right.
which was great, which is
They are. Those are
yeah,
right.
but
Those are
you're
totally right.
positioned uniquely in the biopsychosocial world that you're able to say, you know what therapists aren't leaning into enough is let's first check the bio. Let's first check the hormones. This is
But let's do it at the same time. Because sometimes
okay. I
the
said
amount
same
of therapy
time.
I had to do to get this guy on his, do you know what I'm saying? Like, because I don't
Okay,
love the medical
yeah.
model either because they just toss the hormones at them. So
Mhm.
the diagnosis is fine. Low desire, discrepancy desire, those are fine. Whatever people come to, it's figuring out what is causing that. And that is like to go in with a one size fits all. Oh, with discrepancy desire, we're going to do sensate focus.
Right.
I mean, like,
They're not going to do it.
so that's what, like, start parsing it out. Is it because the sex itself is bad? Is it because there are serious issues in relationships? Sometimes that comes up, Is it because there's a physiological piece, or is
Yeah.
it because they have completely unrealistic expectations about what sex should look like at this point? Have they not been willing to shift their expectations as they've gotten older? Like, to my mind, it's like there's the layer that's really interesting.
Say that again. The layer that's really interesting is sparsing out these five options that
Yes,
all
or
work
more. Yes,
together. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
hmm hmm This was helpful. And you almost answered the next one, which is what approach would you take? And it's
So,
like you have like a decision tree of, well, let's look at this and this and this and
and
this.
usually it's more than one thing. And
Yeah.
sometimes one has caused the other, right?
hmm
She's had pain. Now she doesn't want to have sex and she's scared. And now he's furious. And now we need to like dig through that to get there, right? Like, so, but I do try to separate out. I'm seeing this couple who are 72 years old and they've been together like 16 years and they hadn't had sex in like 10 years or 15 years. And they've been sent to 3 doctors, 2 other sex therapists. Somebody sent them to me and I'm like thinking to myself, what am I going to do here? Seriously, it was one of I don't know if you ever end up with that, but like, you're like, anyway, they're having sex. And the reason, it was all her fault. That was the narrative. It was all her fault. She never had any interest. She was never that, sexy. Um, she didn't want to. They went to all these sex therapists. She never did anything. Anyway, she felt broken from day one on this, right? Like she felt like she was always not good enough, always, whatever. So I needed to work with her to make sure that she didn't feel so broken anymore. And then do you know what I mean? Like, so trying to say like, what is it? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, what is it that's causing the low desire? But so often it has to do with these. I mean, the low hanging fruit for me is this like narrative. Like that was a more complicated one, but the low hanging fruit is our narrative. Our narrative that I always say there are 3 things in our narrative that are so unconstructive. Like I have an online course for low desire, and like this, I just
Yeah.
basically it's based on these 3 things.
Yeah.
One is this like think of it like a movement program, not like magic pixie dust, right? Which we talked
Uh-huh.
about. Most sex therapists are into. The second thing is this, you should have to be relaxed and present. This enrages me. I can't even like, I'm just jumping up and down. Like there is this narrative. It's all over the internet. It's all over TikTok. It's all over the sex therapists. Women have to be relaxed and present. If you're not relaxed and present, you're not going to have good sex. And I'm like, you show me a woman who's got parents she's taking care of, kids she's taking care of, a job. Like if you tell a woman that she's going to have sex when she retires, if then, do you know what I'm saying? Like it is so not. So I'm like, screw relaxed and present and start learning how to fill your mind with sexy things. Figure out what it is that, you know what I mean? Would be that fantasizing.
Hijack your own experience.
Exactly. Like you're not going to empty your mind. Maybe on vacation, and that's lovely when that happens. But like you're not really going to empty your mind. So let's not empty your mind. Let's refill it. Let's just get on some literotica. Do whatever you need to do to change the channel. Don't try to turn on blank. Like Doesn't work. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the third thing is this idea that like your partner is supposed to be what turns you on, as opposed to like, come on, we've been married for 10 years. I adore my husband. Like, there's no way in the world that seeing that man in my bed is going to be what gets me going. Do you know what I mean? Like, I have to figure out what turns me on. That's my responsibility and my job, not his job. So those three, I feel like those three fundamental truths, they're so distorted in our society that so often leads women to think they have low desire when they are perfectly normal. They just need to shift their way of thinking and figure out how to handle those things. Now, again, they're having pain or they have an asshole for a spouse. Do you know what I'm saying? Right.
That's different. Yeah. No,
So
that was
that's how I
fascinating.
approach it.
No, I love and agree like everything you said, but I don't think I've ever heard that that succinctly with here are three ideas that are absolutely getting in our way.
So you know what? If I could figure out how to sell my course, I'd be so happy. But I
It's
think
hard to sell courses. I don't know.
I did it more because I just thought it would be fun. So,
Yeah.
but that's exactly, I think those three things are so critical
Well,
for
I'll tell
getting
all
out
my
of the way.
people, go take your course because these are amazing ideas. And I do think that these ideas are found for those who are religious, but I also think that those three things are found outside of religion also. Is you need to be the one that's turning me on. These idea of I need to be relaxed
The
first.
relaxed and present one really drives me nuts, drives me nuts. And also that sex therapists seem to jump into that also. And
Yeah.
I do get that you have to learn how to feel what's going on in your body. I'm not negating that, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's maybe like, well, this is like off topic, but one of my complaints a little bit about Schnarch is this eyes open sex looking into each other. I'm like, wait a minute, what if she has to go somewhere? What if she's got to think about some things? You
No,
know?
no, totally, totally. Yes. I mean, like all of these people, you take the good and you leave the bad.
Yes,
Like,
yeah,
yes,
yeah, yeah,
totally.
yeah. Okay, we have like 1 minute. Any additional op-ed commentary, complimentary or not, as your thoughts about just the beginning of a new conversation about consent and wanting and
I love that you're doing this. I love that. I think that language is really important, as we talked
Mhm,
about.
mhm,
And when I hear words like coercive, it scares me a little bit because it
mhm.
feels like it takes something which is gently a problem. Like the same thing I have with the word trauma, where I feel like everything is
Yeah,
twisted into trauma now. And I'm like,
yeah.
this wasn't I mean, I guess it could if people could hear minor trauma, but this was like a disruption, right? This was a problem.
Mhm.
But not everything is a trauma, right?
Right.
And
Mhm.
so sort of parsing out what is coercive sex versus what is sex that I don't kind of feel like having, or like what is sex that is like a pain in the butt. She was like, you know what I mean? Like that feels a little different to me. So that's the only thing I throw in here in terms of when I think about research on this. But I think it's amazing, amazing that you're doing this research.
Thank you. Do you
And I'd
have
love to,
ideas for language? Like what would you call it? If someone was like, help me come up with some terminology here, what would you call that?
a great question. I really haven't thought about that, but I will, Cami. I
Okay,
will think
yeah,
about that and I'll send you an email if I have an idea.
awesome.
Seriously.
Yeah, because
Because
like
I do
language
think it's
matters.
really interesting. And I do think coercion it feels like half step before rape. Do you know what I mean? Here we're talking,
Right.
you know,
And that's a concern because I've worked with a lot of men who are really good guys, and this pattern is alive and strong, and both people are coming by this honestly from these, low
yes,
education, unrealistic beliefs. And we've got a good guy, but the outcome is not great. And that word really isn't going to resonate with some couples or.
right. It is really interesting. It is really, really, really interesting question. There has to be another word for this, right? There has to be. I just have to think it through.
If you come up with something, email me. I'd love to hear it.
Even pressured feels better than coercive,
Uh-huh.
but even that feels kind of ex maybe focusing more on the expectations ends of it, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
choice expectation piece may be an easier way to talk to people about it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I
Will you keep
really
me
appreciate
posted?
your time.
Will
I
you keep me?
will. I
Okay,
will.
great.
Thank you so
Great. Well, good
much.
luck for you. This is
Thank you.
amazing.
Thank you. I appreciate that
Take good
encouragement.
care.
You
Okay,
too.
great. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.